Continuing with my exploration of the OVN series of mods, today we have Araby. If you weren't aware, Araby are more than a single settlement on the Immortal Empires map. They're actually their own entire faction of humans inhabiting both colossal cities and nomadic tribes. But how does their campaign gameplay stack up? Let's take a look and find out. But first, why not pick up some games on the cheap with instant gaming? We all love games, but these days they're pretty expensive. With instant gaming, you can save a ton of cash buying both the latest games and some older picks for a fraction of their full price. So you can spend that money that you saved probably on more games. Maybe you want to hop onto Manor for 49% off, or Dragon's Dogma 2 for 45% off. Or maybe you want to come back to the XCOM series that you've missed and pick up 3 complete games for a staggering 93% off. Bottom line is, games are a lot cheaper than you can find them anywhere else, all from a trustworthy source with 24/7 customer service. Check out Instant Gaming at the link in the description and grab yourself some cheap games, and thanks again to Instant Gaming for partnering with the channel. Let's first go through their racial mechanics, which are shared between all 3 factions currently in the mod. First, we have internal strife. The population of Araby is divided, with some choosing to live in cities and others preferring a more nomadic desert lifestyle. Both sides believe they should be in charge to better lead Araby, and over the course of your campaign, you'll have to decide which you'd like to align with. The balance of power will shift as you build military buildings in your settlements, and if either side rises to power, your faction will gain some powerful bonuses. This does require a substantial margin of 24 more on either side, so it can take some doing, and you don't have to worry too much about it happening by accident. Most infrastructure buildings will offer bonuses depending on the ruling party, and while there are no downsides for either side, it can be beneficial to have one side or the other depending on exactly what you're doing. They also have the Grand Bazaar. This is essentially a crafting mechanic similar to the Forge from the Dwarves. This allows you to trade gold for various items, with more elite items requiring a lot more gold and access to various tradable resources. This also links with the voluntary workers mechanic that 2 out of the 3 legendary lords have access to, but I'll cover that in more detail when I go over the different factions. Lastly, since they can take over settlements, they can also use commandments. Jihad is best used when recruiting or under siege from enemy heroes. Crack the Whip is best used when you're trying to rush growth or maintain control. Obviously, it's better to manage control elsewhere, but if you really need it, this is an option. Golden Age is best used when you're focusing on gold income. Obviously, this brings better value in your more lucrative regions, so choose accordingly. And Nomad Outpost is best used when under siege from enemy armies to slow their movement and train up any defending armies so they're ready to fight. Now let's go through the 3 different factions that you can play as in this mod. The Aswad Siphons are led by Fatandira. I'm not sure. They're led by this lady. Her unique mechanic is her allegiance. Over the course of the game, she must choose whether to side with the Tomb Kings or the people of Araby. This is done via buildings, battles, technology from their split research tree, diplomatic actions, and other events. Both sides offer powerful bonuses, so which you choose really depends on how you want to play. Araby offers research speed, growth, control, buffs to Araby unit cost and weapon strength, as well as access to powerful Royal Jinn units. The Tomb Kings offer construction cost reductions, growth, control, weapon strength buffs to Tomb King units, and increased capacity, as well as some Tomb King regiments of renown. No matter what you choose, you'll still be able to make use of both rosters for the entire campaign, but the Tomb King units are fairly limited, so choose wisely. Once either side reaches max allegiance, it'll lock in, so you'll no longer be able to change it back to the other side. Just make sure you're happy with your decision and know what's affecting these values instead of accidentally locking yourself out without noticing. Your allegiance to the Tomb Kings is mainly centered around New Mass, and as such you'll be greatly rewarded for aiding them in wars and returning their capital to them should it ever be taken. You can choose to betray New Mass, but doing so will severely affect your growth and control for 20 turns, so think carefully before going through this, as it could heavily slow down your campaign. Alongside all of this, she has greatly increased relations with New Mass and slightly increased with all of the Tomb Kings. She has an easy time maintaining control of all her provinces, can recruit more elite Hashishans right out the gate, and reduces the upkeep of most nomadic units. She's also an ambush expert, gaining a huge bonus success chance, allowing her to twist any scenario into her favor, and she also provides much more ammo for her ranged units, and all nomadic units in her army gain stalk, making her into a great hit-and-run ambush sneaky style army. The faction starts in Karag or Rud, and her starting units are 2 spearmen, some nomad trackers, bowmen, Jezzails, Wagzen, and desert riders. She starts with a Hashishan hero. Her climate preferences are wasteland, mountain, temperate, savanna, and desert are suitable, temperate island and jungle are unpleasant, and frozen, magical forest, ocean, and chaotic wasteland are uninhabitable. And the victory conditions for all 3 of these lords are just the standard occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. So you are going to have to find your own fun just a little bit. Next, the Golden Fleet, which is led by the Golden Mages. For its faction mechanics, the Sultan of the Seas is first up. This gets him access to all kinds of mechanics from the Vampire Coast. He takes part in the Infamy ladder, so can climb this over time to take on legendary pirates and collect the 3 verses of the legendary sea shanty for use in battle. He can seek out pieces of 8 also held by legendary pirates, and in doing so will not only gain a bunch of bonuses for his faction, but also Royal Jin Regiments of Renown. He can dig for treasure by following clues on treasure maps to find the right location, and use the dig movement stance to search the area, and the legendary lord can use shipbuilding to recruit most of the roster no matter where he goes, alongside a bunch of other army buffs. He also has access to the voluntary workers mechanic. This is a slight tweaking from the Dark Elves mechanic. They can still make use of dig tax to increase local growth, income or control. Their infrastructure buildings all gain increased effects when you have plenty of voluntary workers to fuel them with. And lastly, they can be used to rush the construction of buildings. They gain via battles, post-battle captives, passively from port buildings. This also changes the Grand Bazaar to have an additional voluntary workers market where you can purchase characters from various factions, used as ancillaries with your lords and heroes. And lastly, this isn't mentioned anywhere, but he also has some sort of Siege influence. They'll occasionally gain missions from Siege, offering them various rewards. These rewards range from infamy to voluntary workers, and even a number of Siege units to summon into your armies. And alongside all of this, they also gain increased relations with the Pirates of Sartosa, increased income from sacking settlements, increased income from voluntary workers, and immunity to high seas, reef, and storm attrition. And lastly, the Golden Mages themselves grants flaming and magical attacks for Corsair units, as well as increasing their leadership and weapon strength. Their faction starts in the Copper Landing, and their starting army has 2 Corsairs, 2 Bowmen, some Ogre Pistols Man-Eaters, some Flying Carpets, and some Enchanted Ropes, as well as starting with a Magician of Jin hero. For the climate preferences, Temperate Island and Ocean move to Suitable, and Wasteland and Mountains move to Unpleasant. Lastly, we have the Sultanate of Araby, and they are led by Sultan Jafar. His mechanic is Jafar's Revenge. This is pretty much a big old questline to chase for the duration of his campaign. This is a multi-stage mission-based mechanic that will keep you busy for a very, very long time. It first requires you to take control of various regions, or at least push out Bretonnia and their allies, and destroy a number of Bretonnian factions. You'll then need to take the fight to these invasive factions, like the Pirates and Bretonnians. For each bit of progress you make, you'll gain bonuses to relations with Araby factions, control and recruitment cost reductions, but to start off with, you'll suffer penalties for all these, making this a very challenging campaign early on. For each stage you complete, you'll gain legendary lords, as well as Royal Jin Regiments of Renown to aid you in the next steps of your journey. He also has access to the voluntary workers mechanic. Just the same as the Golden Mages, they can collect voluntary workers and use them for loss of profit. And lastly, he has the Jalaba's Way caravans. This is more or less the caravans mechanic from Cathay. You recruit caravan lords, give them some gold, and send them off to far off locations, and if they make it in one piece, they'll give you gold and the occasional item. You'll still be dealing with these same dilemmas where you can pick up all kinds of units from various factions, and you'll still be facing near constant attacks from the AI if you send them anywhere even remotely dangerous, making this a great way to almost always waste a bunch of gold. Alongside all of this, he has reduced relations with the Tomb Kings and most of the desert-based Bretonnians, and increased Lord Recruit rank, research rate, and income from trade. For his army, Palace Guards gain the Guardian ability and half the upkeep, and all units gain a plus 10% charge bonus. Their faction starts in Al Haik, and for his starting army, he has Spearmen, Palace Guards, 2 Bowmen, some Arabian Nights, and Arabian Days, and also a Genie. And they start with an Emir hero. And lastly, for the climate preferences, Wasteland is back in Suitable, Temperate Island is back in Unpleasant, and Ocean is back in Uninhabitable. So now for a few thoughts on how the campaign aspect of Araby is, and I have to say, I'm blown away by how impressive this faction feels to play. If I didn't know any better, I just assumed this was DLC because they really do feel like a complete faction. Now sure, you might occasionally hear the wrong voice line and some textures for certain things are a little bit weird, but on the whole they feel like a very complete experience, and if CA ever come back to add Araby themselves, they're going to have some stiff competition. The racial mechanics are super simple to work out, but still offer some powerful rewards if you really get into them. The representation of the internal power struggle is really cool, but I do wish it was a bit more dynamic, similar to the current harmony system for Cathay. At the moment, it's just a threshold of control you cross for either side, and then some buildings gain some bonus effects. My recommendation would be to steal the harmony mechanic and do something similar, where each region has their own power struggle. That way I can min-max my regions, get the best out of both worlds, or cement my focus. You can even have this linked back to some overall power struggle, where each region under the control of each affects some overall balance with faction-wide buffs. The market is okay and a good way to burn some cash, but personally, items are always a little bit of an afterthought for me, so this was just a nice little bonus mechanic rather than something I'm crazy excited to use. The integration with the voluntary workers is really great, and the way you can recruit more powerful people from factions the more you beat them in battle is a really cool way to unlock more options over time depending on what you're doing. The 3 factions each feel very unique to play, with their own little mechanics steering you in what to do and making each playthrough feel different enough to warrant giving them all a try. The victory conditions are total ass though. If the mod makers are watching this, just ask the victory conditions overhaul dudes to set some up, because this feels like a little bit of a letdown compared to how good the rest of the mod is. Aside from that one small niggle though, the campaign side of things is really impressive, and I can't wait to take a closer look at the roster next week. But that's all I have for today on the campaign side of things for the OVN Araby mod. Let me know your thoughts on the mod down below, as well as any other mods you'd like me to take a look at. Like, subscribe, and if you want more mod videos, then why not check out this video on the Grudgebringers, which is also a part of the OVN collection.